Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Just came across a research article that was published last month by the University of New South Wales, and this article claims that at the current pace of photovoltaic manufacturing, with all of the climate change goals that have been set, photovoltaics may consume 85 to 98% of existing silver reserves over the coming decades. And so clearly, this research, if true, has some significant implications for the supply and availability of silver as well as for the price. And, we talk a lot about the monetary properties of silver on this channel, but it's easy to forget the unique industrial properties that silver has. It's the most conductive metal of electricity and heat. It is naturally non-toxic and antimicrobial. And so, all these properties mean a lot of silver is going to get consumed. And in today's video, we're going to talk a little bit more about that research and what it might mean for silver stackers moving forward. So let's get to it. One of silver's properties that makes it so useful in industry is that it is naturally non-toxic and antimicrobial. And today's video sponsor, Silver Botanicals, utilizes this property of silver in their lineup of household and personal hygiene products that are powered by silver nanoparticles. Check them out with the link down in the description, and don't forget to use coupon code STACKER to save 10% on your order. So this is the article from PV Magazine. So this is a magazine specializing in photovoltaics. This is the article that initially drew my attention to this research article that was published by the University of New South Wales last month. And you can see just from the intro paragraph here, based on expected PV growth in line with climate change commitments, solar manufacturers would require at least 85% of global silver reserves, according to the new study. Now, we can just go ahead and hop right over here to the study and take a look at it. It's titled, "The Silver Learning Curve for Photovoltaics and Projected Silver Demand for Net Zero Emissions by 2050. And if you want to check this article out, just Google it. It's interesting, I suppose. I mean, there's a lot of very technical language in here, but this couple of sentences here in the abstract, I think, is the most interesting portion of the research article. And it says, maintaining business as usual with a dominance of P-type technology, so that's what they're making right now, could require over 20% of the current annual silver supply by 2027 and a cumulative 450 to 520 kilotons of silver until 2050, approximately 85 to 98% of the global silver reserves. A rapid transition to higher efficiency tunnel oxide, passivated contact, and silicon heterojunction cell technologies in their present silver-intensive forms could increase and accelerate silver demand. That's a bit of a mouthful, and I'm not an electrical engineer or too technically minded when it comes to photovoltaic panels, but it sounds like to me that basically what this research has determined is that should the status quo be maintained, a significant portion, like almost all of the current global silver reserves, are going to be needed simply to manufacture enough photovoltaic panels to hit the current climate change goals, but that there's also a higher efficiency technology that is more silver intensive. And if we see a transition to that, the consumption of silver could accelerate even more. Again, I don't know too much about the technology behind photovoltaics, except that silver is essential for it, and that there are some alternatives. For example, I believe copper can be used in solar panels as well. But one of the problems with that is that the panels are not as efficient, and also that they don't last as long. So you got to make more of them. You got to change them out more frequently. And another thing I would like to point out when it comes to alternatives is that if copper is your alternative, well, the green revolution, call it whatever you want, transition to these quote unquote sustainable technologies or renewable energy technologies, it's going to require a lot of copper as well. So likely both metals are going to see their prices and demand increase significantly. So I don't know that really replacing the silver with copper would help too much. The current trend here is one of an increasing silver consumption for photovoltaics. Now, this article, one of the things it does recommend is more resources be devoted to developing alternatives, and maybe something will come of that, maybe it won't. I mean, there's no way to forecast breakthrough technologies or anything along those lines, but it's clear that the current trend is more silver consumed. And this is a chart of silver supply and demand provided by the Silver Institute, and you can see that based on the data they provide, the trend is absolutely one of increasing silver consumption. You can see here under industrial demand, electrical and electronic consumption increasing from 270 million ounces a decade ago to 353 million ounces today. And a lot of that has to do with electric vehicles, charging stations, that sort of thing, just the general increase in the number of electronics that society is using as we transition to the Internet of Things and 5G and all of that stuff. All of that stuff requires silver. And a lot of that silver, it gets put into these electronics and then it's basically not recoverable afterwards. I mean, yeah, there is some recycling that goes on, but with the silver price as low as it is today, a lot of recycling just isn't economical. And then also here you can see that the trend of photovoltaics is increasing even faster. The trend of silver consumption in photovoltaics rising from 55 million ounces in 2012 to 127 million ounces in 2022. So more than a 100% increase in the amount of silver consumed over the past decade. Now, what's the takeaway from all of this? Well, I think it means that the silver price is simply going to have to move much higher. Now, I do think that there's enough silver out there to meet the demand for these applications. I mean, maybe not at the rate that, is forecast to make us carbon neutral by 2050. I think that's a bit pie in the sky. I don't think that that's even possible necessarily, but, we'll see. I mean, technology can do a lot of amazing things. But I do think that there's going to be enough silver out there. But the thing is that the price of silver, in order to ensure adequate supply, will have to move much higher because there's a lot of silver out there that can't be recycled because it's not cost efficient. There are silver mines, silver deposits that could be mined if the price of silver was higher, but you need that higher silver price. And, very few resources are as cheap as silver is right now. And one way you know that is we can take a look at the inflation-adjusted price from silver's all-time high. If you go back to 1980, silver hit $50 in trading. And if you use the CPI to adjust that for inflation, that would give you a price today of $180. Now, very, very few commodities are trading below their 1980 inflation-adjusted high, and certainly not multiples below that level. Now, a lot of people watching may be saying, well, in 1980, the Hunt brothers, they tried to corner the market. Well, yeah, there was a lot of things going on that drove the price of silver up to $50. But I also want to point out that the CPI kind of understates inflation to a dramatic degree. So I'm going to call it a wash and say that the manipulation of the Hunt brothers is outweighed by the CPI understating inflation. Just my take on it. But the point is that silver would need to be much closer to this price in order to ensure adequate supply. And I think that, the whole silver squeeze thing, the dwindling supply of physical silver, a lot of it has to do with investment demand. A lot of it has to do with people getting into hard assets and investors looking for safe havens from the inflationary crisis that we're going through at the moment. But there is this other factor, this growing industrial demand for technological purposes, which is going to put a lot of upward pressure on the price of silver as we move forward. And, none of this is financial advice, of course. I'm just kind of giving you some information and telling you what I'm doing. I mean, I'm getting into hard assets. If you want to get into hard assets and get some physical silver bullion, I shop at SD Bullion. They're my preferred precious metals dealer. They're a channel sponsor. You can check them out with the link down in the description. If you're shopping for metals, that is a great place to start. And if you're not convinced that getting into precious metals is a good idea at this point in history, if the growing consumption in industry doesn't make you want to, get your hands on some of the real stuff, and I'm not talking about paper silver, I don't mean the SLV. I'm talking about real physical, tangible bullion that you can hold in your hand, because you can't make a solar panel with paper silver, of course. If you need a little more convincing, just take a look at this chart. This is the long-term chart of the purchasing power of the consumer dollar over the past 100 years. And if this were a company or a business or a stock, I'd probably want to be getting out of it looking at this chart. And that's kind of the same way I feel about the dollar. So I do believe there is a perfect storm brewing in the precious metals and specifically in silver, because you have this increasing monetary demand for the monetary properties of silver, like its scarcity and its long history as a safe haven and as money. Silver's been money for thousands of years, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. We're not going to see silver go to zero despite how cheap it is at the moment. But the other factor is this increasing industrial consumption, as exemplified by that research study by the University of New South Wales, telling us that photovoltaic consumption of silver could account for 85 to 98% of current reserves by 2050. Now, will they come up with some alternative? I don't know. I'm not a photovoltaic scientist, but I do know that the way things are going, they're going to need a lot more silver. And that means that there's going to be a lot more bids for the price of silver, and that means that the price will likely be moving higher. Again, not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy on YouTube. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking, and I'll catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.